About a week ago, I started hearing noises in my house. Not the noises you hear when the floorboards are settling, and not the noises you think you hear, but aren't actually there. These were loud, terrifying scraping and moaning sounds, like someone was fucking in my attic. At first I was surprised, and then a little afraid, but the sounds quieted down almost as soon as I heard them, so I didn't think much of it. A trick of the mind, I thought. An hour later, after I'd gone to bed and began to drift off to sleep, they started again. This time, much louder. I live alone in a 2-story house I inherited from my parents. The neighborhood is nice, nothing special about it. White picket fences all down the line, you know. What I mean to say is this: nothing weird happens here. Nothing weird is supposed to happen here. When my mother passed and I was given the house, that's the reason I chose to live in it, instead of selling or renting this place out. I was tired of the city, you know? Tired of the hustle. I wanted something peaceful, and for a few months, I had just that. Back to the noise issue. When it started up again, I panicked, grabbed my phone and dialed 911. That's what I was supposed to do, right? The noises didn't stop. In fact, they got louder, clearer. I had never called emergency services before, and I was rattled. As soon as the operator confirmed my address, I hung up like it was instinct. A bad decision, I know, but it was like I wasn't in control. After that, the sounds were so loud I couldn't hear my phone ring. I couldn't even hear the operator calling me back. What at first sounded like a few bangs and scratches, maybe even a voice, had become the loud sounds of unbridled, painful sex. A woman's voice was clear, her moans and screams. Let's just say I can still imagine them, vividly. This kept me up for at least 5 more minutes, and it was just constantly growing in volume. It wasn't until the doorbell rang that I went silent. Dead silent. All the sounds, the moans, the bangs, they just stopped. It felt like I had stopped too. I was in the bed, terrified. A moment passed and the doorbell rang again. I realized I had to get up, open the door. The cops needed me to let them in, and I willed myself to move. It was almost like a battle. My limbs were weak, like when you feel so exhausted that your arms and legs feel like putty. I didn't think it was that late, but still, it's as though I hadn't slept in days. When I headed down the stairs, I passed the door to the attic. It was slightly open, and now that I think about it, I feel like I saw a dark figure standing in front of the crack of the door. I didn't notice it at the time, but why didn't I notice it? Anyways, I opened the door and there were 2 police officers waiting for me. I was shaking, but was able to explain the situation calmly and clearly. They asked me to step outside, where 2 other men were waiting beside 2 cars and their lights on. The first 2 officers, who were both very respectful and professional, stepped into my house and headed upstairs. A crowd was starting to form outside, filled with middle-aged housewives and children who had been woken up by the police lights. We could all see the officers as they moved through my home. Their flashlights were bright and you could follow them by watching the windows. After a few minutes of moving through the house, the flashlights seemed to go dark when they reached the attic. Then the lights were back, and a second later the officers had emerged from my home with a woman in tow. She was serene. Her clothes were white and notably clean. Her hair was not in a mess, and her face showed no sign of struggle. I think I saw her smile at me. Actually, she was quite beautiful. It's odd to think that someone who was just squatting in my home, they put her in the back of the car and drove away. The other two officers remained behind to ask me a few questions and then drove me down to the station to fill out some paperwork. I was still shaken, calm and reserved, but shaken. This whole situation was still a day from really hitting me. The lights of the stations hurt my eyes. After that, another pair of officers drove me home and dropped me off. An older gentleman, one of my neighbors who had a tendency to act as something of a patriarch of the neighborhood, was waiting for me outside my house. He asked me what happened. I gave him the briefest rundown of events as I possibly could. He asked me if I'd like to sleep in his guest room for the night. I declined. My nerves were still on high. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and turned to the TV. Nothing really interesting was on. Infomercials, a few B movies. I found something bearable to watch until I could fall asleep. Come morning, I was all but rejuvenated, and I began to comprehend the reality of the situation. Someone had been living in my attic, maybe even eating my food, and those sounds, they were gruesome. I was all at once horrified, angry, and relieved. It had been handled quickly and cleanly, and there was no mess, or so I thought. As I sat there on my couch sitting and thinking, I realized there was a mess in the attic. She had been living up there, so what might she have left behind? My mind immediately went to rats. Rats. If I don't clean that up, I'll get rats. Maybe I was still in shock, but this was all my mind could think about. The damn rats. Frustrated and acting out of instinct, I'd stomp my way up the stairs, but I was frozen by what I saw. There was nothing there. The door was just open, the lights were out, so it was still dark in the attic, but the door was open, and I could see the stairs leading up. Still, even that obscenely normal, nothing special sight frightened me. I took a breath and walked back down to the first floor, into the kitchen. I found the phone book and flipped through it and dialed a maid service. I explained the situation, paid the fee, and they sent a woman over. She arrived about an hour later. I pointed her up the stairs and to the attic. Her employer had briefed her on the situation, and she acted with such keen professionalism, for which I was really thankful for. Another hour passed. I called work to tell them I wasn't coming in today, and the maid came back from the attic. Her back was stiffer than it had been before, and she moved with haste. She had a white garbage bag that seemed almost full. I thanked her for her time, and she took it outside. But as she did, I was unfortunately able to catch a glimpse of its contents through the thin, cheap plastic. Candles, red string, a bag of chips, my chips, and I recognized them as they were my favorite brand. The maid approached me for a final confirmation that she was done, and just before I thought to let her go, I asked if she closed the door. She seemed stunned and didn't respond. I asked her again, "Did you close the damn door?" Admittedly, I was angry and aggressive too, maybe a little too much. She quickly responded with a slurred, "Yes, sir," and asked if she was done. I, still frustrated for no real reason, told her that she could leave, and then she seemed almost to run to her car. After that, I went out, bought some groceries, and drove around. I wasn't really doing anything, I just didn't want to go home yet. Eventually, though, after night had fallen and the roads were empty, I had to. It was strange driving through the neighborhood at night. It was only 8, and yet it seemed that all the lights had already gone out and everyone was asleep. When I returned home, I quickly put the food away and turned on the TV again. I watched boring crap for 3 hours for no other reason other than I didn't want to go upstairs. Then, at about 11, the sounds started again. This time, there was no moaning or screaming, just scratching and some bangs. It was soft at first, like someone was walking softly above me, but eventually grew loud enough that I couldn't even drown it out with the TV. Angry, frustrated, and exhausted, I stormed my way to the base of the stairs, and I stopped again. I looked up, and what I saw was darkness. Not a figure or anything special, just darkness. I had yet to even return to my own room since the prior night, and now I felt as though I couldn't even walk up the stairs. I was afraid. I'm still terrified. Instead of going up, I receded again into the living room, now at the computer instead of the TV. I have my headset on, with my music almost as loud as it can go. My ears are hurting, but the sounds are still there. Even if I can't hear them, I can feel the scratching on the wood above me. I had hoped writing all of this out would calm my nerves, and maybe it had a little, but I feel like I can't tear myself away from the screen. If I do, I'll hear the sounds again, and I'm too afraid to go upstairs. I'll sleep on the couch again, or I won't sleep at all. Maybe I'll post again if anything happens. Right now, I can't decide if I should call the police again or if I'm just in shock.